Hey, what's going on, guys? Who's ready for a Mook review, and specifically a very Gunpla themed Mook review here for today, considering we're doing the Gunpla Advent calendar here on the channel. So all this month of December leading up to Christmas, all doing Gunpla related content, including Mook reviews, and this one is a really cool one here from Teppei Hayashi, which we've taken a look at before. The weekend modeling amazing Gunpla techniques. Amazing, easy, simple Gunpla techniques. The title's something like that it translates to. It's got like 3 different titles there on it, so it's kind of hard to know what exactly the title should be for this. But the Gunpla Super Technique Mook here from Hobby Japan, and this particular edition is the mixing edition. Now, mixing is the Japanese words for what they use instead of kit bashing. So what we call kit bashing here in the West, and in the English Gunpla speaking community, they call mixing, and that's what this is all about. So it's about kit bashing Gunpla, which is a lot of fun. I enjoy that quite a bit, and there should be some really nice, interesting techniques covered in here. And the whole theme with these books too is that, you know, they're made for learning simple techniques. So it's not going to be like anything, you know, super in-depth, very accessible techniques to those of you guys who are even beginners to intermediate to advanced. Even, you know, those of you guys who may be more advanced modelers, you can always find interesting stuff in these MOOCs. So I really like this series. Let's go ahead and check it out for today's video. All right, so right here on the front, for example, we have this really cool astray. And if you lift up this part, actually, it's got the title right there as well, Gunpla Super Technique. And if you take off this jacket here entirely, we've just got the same thing there, monochrome without the image of the Gundam here on the inside there. A little bit about the Gunpla Super Technique and Teppei Hayashi. Started from 1981, and there's like his Twitter handle and everything on there as well. You can follow. This is a decently sized MOOC here, coming in at just under 100 pages in length. The MSRP for this one at 1,500 yen, so about 12 bucks, something like that. Not too bad at all. And here on the back side, you can see images of some of the kits that are going to be samples inside here. So we'll see some more about that. There's also here some more about some of the other books from Hobby Japan and Teppei Hayashi. The Gunpla Super Technique there, another Gunpla Super Technique. This is the HG edition. This is, I think, just the original one. I think that was like easy finish in 3 steps, something like that was that one. And there's a 5-star stories one here as well. Or no, what is that? Something about the mobile modelers finishing guide, something like that. Interesting, I'm not sure. So I guess that's about for like making models when you're traveling or something, maybe? I don't know. All right. So going all the way back up to the beginning here, we've got some more, just a kind of intro to, or an introduction from Teppei Hayashi to, you know, us, the modeler there in Japanese. And then we've got our table of contents. So you can see some of these really cool works that we're going to see in this book. You know, ranging in levels, you know, it's all about kit bashing or mixing. This is going to be ranging in levels, I'm sure, from like the more basic to the more advanced builds, and we'll see that kind of throughout. You can see the table of contents broken down over here on the side. Another thing that I'm going to be keeping an eye out for is ideas, because this is a great, books like this are great for just getting ideas for different techniques to, you know, to try out myself, but more importantly also to share them with you guys here on the channel, whether it be like in specific tutorial videos or just trying them out within my own works in progress videos. So here we got a breakdown of some of the basic tools, also books down here. Shout out to some other Hobby Japan books there. You got your nippers, knife, part separator, drill, cement, putty of different types, and some other MOOCs down here as well. So of course, MOOCs are, you know, like this one, a really, really fantastic tool. You know, aside from all these typical tools that you typically think of for making Gunpla, MOOCs like this are also great tools for giving you ideas and also, you know, the knowledge about how you can customize your kits and make them even more interesting. So there's a little breakdown here about some, this looks like a history of some different like Gunpla tutorial related MOOCs, starting off from the How to Build Gundam book there. When is that? From 1980. And then we got more Hobby Japan stuff kind of through the years here. So that's kind of interesting. And now we're into our first build, which is going to be a HG Crossbone Gundam X1 mixed with an HG Gundam F91. So very interesting. Important to note, and I'm sure this is mentioned here in the text, although, you know, obviously all the text is in English, so I'm not going to be able to read and translate everything here for you guys. But one thing is important to consider, of course, when you're doing mixing or kit bashing is, of course, the size. And with the Crossbone Gundam and the F91 both being of a smaller stature, makes for easier kit bashing. If you want to try to mix the F91, which is a small size Gundam, with a Unicorn Gundam, which is a large size Gundam, you're going to have more proportion changes that you need to make depending on the parts that you wanted to use, etc., etc. It's just something to consider. So anyway, first of all, we just got some basic steps about like cutting the pegs at a 45-degree angle. I've talked about that many times, just to make your kits kind of either easier to separate or just go together better for doing your seam line removal. And that looks like that's what he's working on here, just removing the seam on that part in the leg. And then this is like just disassembling the kits over here. Maybe some basic steps about just kind of familiarizing yourself with different parts of the kit. Like for example, say you wanted to switch the arms. You look at the arms and you see one is a ball and socket joint, the other is a ball and socket joint, but it's the opposite way. So either you're going to have to modify one way or the other way in order to swap the arms in the two kits. So yeah, it's just like when it comes to kit bashing or mixing, in this case, you know, a lot of it's just kind of the first stage is just kind of figuring out how much work you have ahead of yourself. You know, if that's something that you want to do. Say you wanted to take the arms from one kit and put them on another kit. Once you look a little bit more into it and you're looking at the kits actually side by side, the parts side by side, and you're thinking, oh, well, this isn't just going to work as like a simple plug and play kind of situation. It's going to take, you know, a lot more modification. Maybe that's going to be something that you're willing to do, or maybe not. So just some more basic building steps here, it looks like. So he's going for like a pretty simple finish on this one, using some of these stickers and just some panel line pens just to do some panel lining. Painted a couple of parts here, like these blue parts from the F91, painted into black to match the aesthetic of the Crossbone Gundam here. Some more panel lining, and also just using a knife to clean up your panel lining in and around some of these areas that you just like colored in this whole section in black. And a kind of similar look here, using some enamel paint to paint the inside of the shoulder armor there, top coat on everything as well, and using the stickers. And then here you go, just kind of basic build here with just a little bit of painting, a little bit of panel lining, some stickers and some top coat on there, and there you go, you have your Crossbone F91 Gundam kit bash. Looking pretty cool, I gotta say. So one thing I should also make sure to let you guys know, just kind of as we're starting off taking a look through this, I'm not going to go through in like extreme detail talking about every step of every build, because this video would be like 2 hours long. But want to just kind of highlight some of the interesting points that I'm kind of seeing along the way. Obviously, there's a lot. There would be, like, you know, if you really wanted to, you know, glean as much information out of this as you could, you'd have to, you know, translate everything and make sure to take your time to read through everything even that much more closely. But here we have the HG Act Zaku mixed with an HG Zaku 2 Ortega use high mobility type. So the high mobility type Zaku 2 basically mixed with the Act Zaku, which is a pretty cool build. And we can see some goof over here as well. Looks like maybe he's going to be using some parts from the goof. Ultimately, though, it doesn't maybe look like it, but maybe that was just a kind of like experimental phase here. Again, I would have to go in and take a closer look at the text, but I really like the concept. First of all, just the idea, and this is one of the things I've talked about too, why I love the HG the Origin kits, and specifically the HG the Origin Zeon kits in particular, is we have a lot of variety in that lineup, and they're great for kit bashing like this. So there's a lot of parts that are very interchangeable without doing any modification, which just makes it even that much more easier. And it's really fun to come up with some different like alternative Zeon designs, because like even in canon there was a lot of mixing and matching and different variants and things that were being produced by Zeon, and that you can see like in kit form, but you can get creative with it. So these are really, really good for kit bashing. Over here, it looks like we're getting into some painting and masking and painting the effect parts here too. And just some simple painting and some simple weathering here a little bit with some like panel lining, and looks like maybe some enamel paint used for some like filtering on that. And we've got the finished look here, which has the big Ortega axe and the high mobility type like legs and backpack, but the Act Zaku's like torso, skirt, head, and arms there, or the arms, I think those are the Act Zaku arms, I'm pretty sure. Anyway, so really, really cool kit bash there between those two HG the Origin kits there. Very nice. All right, next up into MG, we've got, so MG is just kind of adds a little bit of difficulty to kit bashing, because then you're dealing with the inner frame as well. This is one reason why myself, and I'm sure a lot of you guys as well, would agree that the HG kits are great for kit bashing, because you don't have to deal with having to modify the inner frame as well if you're having to modify proportions or switching parts, things like that. The inner frame is great for a lot of things, but makes kit bashing a little bit more complicated sometimes. So This is kitbashing the Freedom Gundam version 2.0 with the Providence Gundam. So it looks like essentially we're putting the Providence Gundam's shoulders and backpack and skirt, some of the skirt equipment and the legs as well, onto the Freedom Gundam. So a really interesting kitbash here between the two. This is going to be quite interesting indeed. I think the Providence Gundam also has a little bit more bulky kind of chest too, so this new kitbash version is going to have like a much smaller chest there with the Freedom 2.0, especially around the midsection there, because the Providence has those like hose bits and everything. So this is really, really cool idea. I like that a lot. And it looks like for this one, there's kind of quite a bit more modification that needs to be done to make like the backpack fit onto the Freedom Gundam. Here you can see he's having to like cut and modify this connection part here and use some, looks like clay or putty in there to hold in these brass rods, and using these brass rods as a way to basically connect the back or connect this connection piece into the backpack, and then the backpack will fit onto the Gundam. So basically taking like the backpack connection piece out of the Freedom's backpack and putting it into the Providence backpack there. So yeah, really interesting. So just kind of testing out how the proportions and everything looks there, which parts you want to use or not. That's a big part of it too. You just have to, maybe you start off, you want to mix kit X and kit Y. You need to figure out, which parts of which kit you're going to ultimately end up using. You might only end up using a very little bit of kit X, and it's going to be mostly kit Y. Sometimes it ends up being more closer to 50-50 mix. In this case, it looks like there's a lot of Providence there. It's essentially like the thighs, some of the waist and torso section of the Freedom, the head of the Freedom there, obviously the upper arms of the Freedom. So this is a really, really cool kit bash. I like that quite a lot actually. And these kits are great to kit bash too, just because they're the same size, same scale, both being master grades and both having the same kind of style of details on them. A little bit more kind of modernized styling in terms of the details. And so aesthetically, the parts are already going to blend together quite well. And so that just kind of makes it easier to kit bash. All right, so now going in the opposite direction into something much smaller, we've got some BB Senshi stuff here with the SD, two of the SD kits, the SD Build Fighters and the Legend BB. The name's all kanji, and I forget the name of this particular unit, but anyway, this is the amazing. It's not just the Amazing Red Warrior, but one of the amazing kits there. Yeah, sorry, I forget the names of these two particular variants, but just kind of mixing these, which SD kits would be interesting for mixing. You don't see it quite as much because, SD just kind of a little bit less popular, I feel like, especially here in the West, and especially when it comes to doing kit bashes and things like this. It's just something that you don't really see all too often, but this is pretty cool how this turns out. Basically taking some of like the more decorative armor parts from this kit and then adding them onto the Amazing kit, sort of. So because those like Sengokuden SD kits are like that, because they have a ton of these like really decorative parts on there, those would be pretty cool for adding them onto another kit, which is typically maybe not so decorative like that. So it's an interesting idea, an interesting concept for sure. And for this one here, we can see some more about just kind of how the kit is painted, some of the products that are used, a lot of Citadel products here for the painting of this one. And again, it looks like it's maybe not entirely fully painted. Some of the red parts are just, the red plastic, and then they're just like detail painted. And then here for the gold plated parts too, it looks like it's keeping the gold plated part and then just filling in the red around that for a really good looking result there. That looks really nice. So very interesting kit bash here between the two. So that's pretty cool looking there for you SD fans. Really nice. Okay, so next up, we're moving on to another SD build here, but this one's much more familiar. It's the SD BB Senshi Neo Zeon crossed with the SD Gundam Cross Silhouette Nightingale. Both kits which are really nice, and it would make sense that these would fit together quite well, being both kind of very large mobile armor type red Zeon mobile suits. It's just a matter of like mixing and matching the parts to combine the two. So again, aesthetically, the two kits that you're starting off with are already kind of, already match pretty well. Just kind of figuring out how you want to actually arrange the parts, which parts you want to use. And so here's like one up here using the Neo Zeong's like body and arms, and using like the feet and head and like binder parts of the Nightingale, I think it doesn't look quite as good. And I think you can see there's a little bit of experimentation as to which parts are ultimately going to be used. And as we kind of move on here, you can see how like the determination was made to use some parts over others like that. I think it actually turns out looking pretty cool here. But let's just see. There's some more about just modifying the parts to fit here, having to cut and drill and cut and glue and cut and pin. And yeah, it's just a whole lot of modification to get everything to fit together so that it looks cohesive. And then panel lining, using the stickers. Oh no, God forbid, not the stickers, but yes, you can use stickers, of course. It is an option. And then painting some of the gold details in here as well. You know, using stickers is not something that I would do for like a finished build if it was something I was going to be fully painting. But I mean, for purposes like this, I mean, you can get a really good looking build with, you know, just doing some basic, simple modification. You can use the stickers, you can just hand paint in some of the details and, you know, a little bit of love and a little bit of top coat on there to finish it off. And you got a pretty cool looking kit bash there of the Nightingale and the Neo Zeon. And I like the addition of the Shinanju's horn on the front of the Nightingale's head. It's pretty cool. So very interesting. I like it a lot. Okay, this is very on topic considering I just reviewed this kit, the 1/100 scale Tyran crossed with the 1/100 scale Tyran ground type. All right, so it's a kit bash between two of the same kit, but basically what we're going to make, or what Hayashi-san here has made, is turn it into a quad-legged version of the Terran ground type. So this should be pretty interesting. This is a kit, like when I was doing the review, I was thinking about some of the different options that you could do if you had two of the kit. Like for example, because of the asymmetry of like the machine gun, for example, the legs, if you had two, you could use two of these big massive shields on the legs. There's definitely some different cool options that you could do for customizing this kit. If you can get your hands on two of them, is the problem. So basically what he did was, yeah, he put the two legs with the shields at the front, and then he's making the two legs without the shields to be at the back. And so basically has to come up with a way to join the hip sections together. So you can see there's a couple of different ways to think about it, like either front back to back like that, or top to top. There's another option. It looks like maybe that's what he's gone with here for this one, and experimenting with how the weapons loadout maybe should be with the bazookas in hand or the machine guns on the hand. Very Armored Core looking ultimately in the end for this one, and I think because of like the weathering on it as well, it's going to look very much like an Armored Core kit. Here you can see again where he's just clipping and removing certain parts here which are not going to be necessary, and adding new pins to join these parts here together. For example, these parts onto the side like that. More modification. Okay, and then yeah, using like a putty or a clay, it looks like there, to basically stuff into the center to fix where the connection peg needs to be to actually be able to connect the torso onto the top of it. So that looks pretty cool. And then just kind of covering up the bottom side of that with a little detail. So long as the clay is just going to be kind of hidden inside there, he stuck a couple other parts in there on the sides too, to just kind of also to hide that even more so. Cutting some of these details to glue some of these bits on there. And then top coating and just using some different weathering products, pencils, and looks like probably used some like filtering and chipping and some other different weathering techniques, which is unfortunately just kind of skipped over, as the topic of this Mook is about the actual kit bashing. There's not really going to be much focus on the weathering and painting so much, which is unfortunate, but still, for just different kit bash ideas, this is a pretty cool one. And yeah, it definitely ends up looking very much like something out of Armored Core here, a quad leg Tyran with some big guns, both on the back with those double machine guns there, and then the double bazookas. Very, very cool idea. But yeah, I think the trouble with this would just be getting your hands on two of that kit. So wait for a reprint, I guess, and then try to pick up two if you can. All right, so here we've got another interesting kit bash, and this is going to be something that you do see online from time to time, just because it is fairly common to mix MG and HG, particularly with this kit, the Gyaradoga, and a lot of that comes from the Kondo design. So if you guys are not familiar with, and I'm sure that's probably what we're gonna end up going with this one, something that looks a bit like the Kondo design. So if you guys are not familiar with the Kondo-san as an illustrator, his designs typically have like very large skirting armor, very large shoulder armor, stuff like this. So it's the kind of thing that you can do by mixing the scale here in this case where the HG is going to be the main kit, and then we're going to be taking parts from the MG, which are in a larger scale, and adding them to the HG to give us these exaggerated proportions. It's an easier way than just taking the HG and just making larger parts. You already have the larger parts available in the MG. You can just take those and modify them to fit on there. And it looks like kind of cool what he did, like here for the skirting armor, for example. He took the MG skirting armor and just basically just glued it on top of the HG skirt armor for the front skirts there. For the shoulders and backpack, those had to be modified to fit onto here. The gun as well, basically took the MG gun and just had to cut down the handle so that it would fit into the HG hand there. It's been relatively straightforward stuff, but some cool ideas in here for sure. For the Panzerfaust, or the Sturmfaust, I think Sturmfaust maybe is right. Had to just cut the hole in the hand to be larger to fit the MG size handle there, and the same here for the axe too. And then the part for the back skirt, which holds that, needs a bigger hole. So basically just making a larger hole to accommodate that. For the backpack, essentially it looks like just gluing it on. Just cut off the pegs and you just slap some glue on there. Fortunately, it's like a flat surface to a flat surface, so all you gotta do is just glue it. You're not gonna be able to take it apart for painting then in that case, but you could paint it first and then glue it on. Or you do have some options there. And then over here, this is kind of interesting. After modifying the shoulder armor onto there, he's adding some texture onto the shoulder armor. This is another thing that we talked about in a recent video on the Tyrann, actually. He's doing it in a little bit different way, but it's essentially the same kind of technique. Using glue, it looks like. Or what is that? Oh, no, actually. Well, it's kind of working the same way, but using a different product. He's using the Mr. Tool Cleaner, which is like a really, really strong cleaning product. And just like kind of brushing that onto the part. And it's essentially doing the same thing that I was talking about in that Tyrann video of using the glue to basically start to melt the plastic, and then you just basically abrase. Is that a word? Using an abrasive product. In my case, I used a toothbrush. In this case, he's using a wire brush to basically then make your plastic that's starting to melt into a rough surface. So that's what he did here for the shoulder armor there, which looks pretty cool. So then once you do some top coat and some weathering on top of that, you get a pretty cool looking Kondo style Gyaradoga there with massive backpack, weapons, shoulders, and front skirt armor there. So that looks pretty cool for sure. Very nice. So, okay, next up we've got If mixing. This one mixes the HG God Gundam and the HG Wing Gundam. I really had fun mixing the God Gundam with the, the Blazing God Gundam? The Battle Log version of that kit, because it's basically the same kit. And in this case, these are much more different, but still going to be quite similar in that they're both alternate universe lead Gundams from the 90s. So they do kind of have a little bit of a similar look to them in that sense. Kind of like what we saw with the Crossbone and the F91 at the start. But this one is going to be using, looks like some of the parts from the God Gundam, some of the parts from the Wing Gundam. Ultimately, looking like mostly the Wing Gundam, just with the God Gundam's head and the God Gundam's skirt armor there, for the most part. But the color scheme certainly looks quite cool. We'll see a little bit more about this. The wings do also have a mix of the wing parts from the Wing Gundam and the backpack parts from the God Gundam, so that's kind of interesting. It looks like he also kind of made a gimmick where it can be used as a kind of bow there, which is kind of interesting. So using the God Gundam's backpack and the Wing Gundam's shield to kind of add to the backpack here, and it can be used as a kind of like bow weapon. So kind of cool, not only like customizing, mixing the backpack parts, but then also making it have an additional function of being a weapon there like that, which is kind of cool. It still transforms, and the transformation still looks like the Wing Gundam transformation, but ultimately ends up being pretty cool. Very interesting mix between the two, I gotta say, even though it's, like I said, still kind of has the appearance. I guess the feet are from the God Gundam there as well. So anyway, it's a really interesting mix there between the two. Very nice, yeah. Kind of cool. Even has the shining finger part on there with that as well. Very nice. Okay, interesting for sure. All right, then we got some HG Age here. HG Gundam Age FX mixed with the HG Transient Gundam from Build Fighters, I think, right? Build Fighters Try. The Transient Gundam HG, an HG kit that I like quite a lot. I like that kit, highly recommend it. The Age FX, one that I've not built, but certainly a really interesting design. And the two of these just being, alternate universe Gundams with a lot of clear spiky bits on there. Again, starting off with two kits that are already sort of similar in their appearance. So just makes it that much easier to kit bash them. So if you wanted to take like the transient Gundam and mix it with like a Zaku 2, you're gonna have a much harder time because they just aesthetically, they just don't really have hardly anything in common in terms of how they look. So that's why I kind of keep coming back to that point, because this is something important to consider. So here we have just a bunch of cutting, drilling, gluing, cutting, drilling, and gluing stuff back together. So it's just a whole bunch of mixing of these parts there. And then we've got our Age FX transient Gundam here, looking very cool. Got rid of all the green effect parts, it looks like, and just opted for only using the blue effect parts. And this overall blue and white color scheme with the yellow accents does look really cool for that one. Very interesting. All right, then we got something pretty weird and wacky here. The 1/100 scale AUG, which is a kit that is very old, from 1980, I guess that would be. Plus the HGUC Zogok unicorn versions. That's much more newer kit. And what we're going to be doing with this, I'm not sure. This should be pretty interesting. So with these two kits, you can see number one, just getting rid of the seam line on these parts here, or getting rid of the seam line in one area and turning it into a panel line in a different area. So that's kind of interesting. Modifying these drill parts for the arms to be able to use with the arms of the Zogok, because the arms of the AUG are basically, they're made to look like they're kind of like flexible, but they're not actually flexible. Whereas if you just take the arm parts from the Zogok, then you can have actually flexible arms. So basically taking these big drill parts from the AUG and kit bashing them with the arms of the Zogok, so you actually have more functionality there, which is a good idea. And then also cutting out the eye parts. So for like the mono eye, it's just like a flat detail there on the front of the 1/100 scale AUG. So cutting that out, adding interior parts from the Zogok into there to actually have some interior detail inside there, which looks really cool. For the hose parts, using an actual like wire and spring to make those hose parts look better. Also, big improvement there as well. So some really interesting, fun upgrades to this very unique old 1/100 scale AUG kit there. Painted in all the insides silver to give it that more metallic, kind of realistic look. It ends up looking really, really interesting there. Very nice. That's cool. All right. A couple more left here. We've got the MG Zaku 2 version 2.0, and this is going to be used for one kit mixing. So basically where you're not mixing parts from two kits, it's just one single kit. I don't know if this is still typically called mixing. I feel like there's another word that is commonly used for this, but I suppose mixing is right. But anyway, it's just taking all the parts of the Master Grade Zaku 2 version 2.0 and mixing them up and mixing them around to make it fairly unrecognizable here in the end, making it into something completely different looking. Almost, this has a silhouette kind of very similar to like the Grosser Hund Machining Krieger kit, with it having these kind of reverse legs and like long legs here with just these round armor panels on it. And like one arm and then one blaster arm, very similar to the Grosser Hund in its appearance. And I wonder if that's explicitly mentioned anywhere in here. I would imagine so, because especially when it comes to like the painting and the detailing of this too, with like the armor, like this yellow color band on the armor, and these sort of more militaristic style decals on it, and just this very kind of monochrome color scheme, just all being in this just kind of brown and very weathered look to it. It's very much Machining Krieger inspired, I would have to imagine. So this is just basically just kind of about, again, just figuring out kind of the general silhouette that you want to use, and just cutting and reattaching the parts in different ways to basically get it into the shape that you want. So this is something that I've always wanted to do, something like this. Maybe not necessarily where it's just like using all the parts of one kit and mixing them around, but just making something out of a bunch of scrap parts, because I have a lot of just leftover parts, and just making something new out of all scraps. So it's something I wanted to try for sure. This is a really nice example of it. It looks pretty cool there. Some obviously recognizable Zaku bits here and there, but I mean, just at a glance, you wouldn't immediately recognize this as a mixed up Zaku build necessarily. I don't know, but that ends up looking pretty awesome. All right, we got a couple more here left. We've got the 100 scale mixing build. This one, I'm not sure what this is made out of. This looks like this is made out of, so not necessarily Gunpla, but parts of some other kind of like, just like random plastic stuff. This is another thing too that I've seen a lot, and I've wanted to try this. But basically taking anything, just like junk parts, literally like parts from some old like kids toy, and you also got the classic Yakult bottles there. We're also going to be using an actual spray can in here, and just using the spray can for a part of like the head, just basically making a completely original robot out of just a bunch of junk plastic and metal parts, cutting and gluing them all together to create something entirely new. So very interesting concept for sure, using a whole bunch of little bits in there. You got some zipper bits in there, it looks like, some just random plastic pieces and all sorts of different stuff. Very, very interesting indeed. I want to see what the end result looks like, because it certainly looks pretty wild. Kind of reminds me of that mobile armor sort of thing from Turn A. It was like that big brown thing, which is like a construction equipment sort of mobile suit sort of thing. Can't remember what it's called, but kind of reminds me a little bit of that. Pretty wild design here for this one. But I mean, again, just goes to show you, here's how creative you can get with just all that random stuff. So that's pretty fun. All right, this one here, now we've got the MG Astray Red Frame Kai and the MG Gundam Astray Blue Frame D being mixed here. So I think this is what we've got on the cover. But as you can see, this does have like a kind of alternative beast mode, sort of, which is pretty wild. So obviously that's not featured there on the cover. But that's what this can do, not only just be a mix of the Astray Red Frame Kai and the Blue Frame D, mixing these so that it can also transform into sort of like a blade liger almost sort of looking design there as an added ability of this kit. This is pretty wild. So here you can see just kind of putting everything all together, figuring out how the transformation was going to work first, and then just kind of figuring out where all these parts are going to be added onto there. And the great thing about the Astray, and in some of its variations in particular, it's just like a lot of stuff just like slapped onto it everywhere, and so it kind of fits with the whole mixing, how a lot of mixing kind of ends up working. So there's a lot here about just kind of how all these parts are put together. It kind of looks a bit of a mess. To try to figure out even kind of what's going on with this. There's a lot going on in terms of how this is being customized here, even customizing the parts for what is like the beast mode sort of head to be able to hold the sword blade in its mouth there like that, which is, got to do that too, of course, like Okami style. But ultimately, let's see, once we get along into it here, we've got the painting of that, the painting of the blade parts into gold to match with the red frame, because even though it's a mix of red and blue frame, it's going to make it ultimately into a red frame design. So we're getting rid of any of the blue, and then all the blade parts, we're changing those from orange to gold here, and that is a pretty wild looking kit bash there, with it being able to transform like that. Not look like the best looking transformation, but still it's pretty wild and still pretty cool. Just the fact that it can do it. I definitely prefer it here in mobile suit form like that. It looks pretty good, but for people who maybe aren't into the mobile suit designs where it's like it's got everything on it but the kitchen sink, you may not be super into that, because this is like really heavily loaded up, but it's still pretty cool. I like that, like at least here on the front, it's got a whole bunch of stuff on the sides and the back, but at least here on the front it's like very recognizable, just the Astray red frame. I think if you would have added more stuff to like the front of the legs, the front of the shoulders, the front of the chest and everything, it could have looked very messy. But even though it is kind of a mess with a bunch of stuff on there, it's all to the back, and so from the front it still looks kind of clean there as just the Astray red frame. So I like it. I mean, it turns out pretty interesting. In theory, it's not something that I think if you would have described this to me, I would have thought, that sounds like a bit of a mess. But I think it's pulled off really, really nicely there for that. So that's it. We got some credits here at the back, and that's going to do it for this Mook review. What did you guys think about this one? There was a lot of really interesting stuff in there, some really interesting kit bash ideas. So let me know which one was your favorite from this. I think probably I would have to go with the HG, the Origins kit here, just because I really like this stuff. But the Freedom and Providence kit bash was also really cool too. I liked that one quite a lot. Let me know your favorites in the comment section. If you guys want to check out some more Gunpla kits for yourself that you can practice kit bashing or mixing with, you can check the link in the video description to USA Gundam Store. All sorts of Gunpla and various other tools, paints, and supplies, everything there on the website, so check that out. As always, guys, thanks so much for all of your support. Make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed the video. Make sure that you're subscribed if you're not subscribed yet, and I hope you guys all have a great day. We'll see you next time.